Alberta issued BC an ultimatum this week. Either get on board with the Trans Mountain pipeline expansion or Alberta will turn off the taps to BC, meaning it will cut off the province's gas supply. BC is not waiting to act. It has already filed court documents challenging the legality of that threat. So what's the case all about? And with BC gas prices at crippling highs, does the provincial government have any wiggle room on the TMX pipeline? David Eby is BC's Attorney General. He joins us now from Victoria. Hi there, Mr. Eby. Nice to see you. Thank you for your time.
Hi, Vashi. Thanks for having me.
So what's the difference between what Alberta wants to do, which is kind of control the resources that flow through its border, and what BC is saying it wants to do in its court challenge of TMX, control the resources that flow through its border?
Well, the big difference is that there's a specific provision of the Constitution that says Alberta is not allowed to do what it's proposing to do, which is to discriminate against a province in distributing a natural resource in that province in order to compel the other province to agree with it. And the legislature was very clear when this bill was introduced under the previous government. Mr. Kenney's been very clear. The purpose of the law, the way it's going to be used, is to compel British Columbia to support this pipeline. And it's an illegal purpose. What we're doing on our end is we have proposed a regulation that says that there should be adequate spill control in place before there's any increase in shipments of diluted bitumen, whether through an expanded Trans Mountain pipeline or by rail. It doesn't matter, but that there should be spill control in place before there's an increase in shipments through British Columbia. We believe that we have shared jurisdiction over the area of the environment with the federal government, and we're doing a reference case at the Court of Appeal to ask whether we do have the authority to actually put these regulations in place.
But those regulations, in essence, you're stipulating what conditions are necessary for your province to mandate kind of what goes in and what goes out of your province, and that's kind of what Alberta's doing too.
So we've got in excess of 10,000 jobs, billions of dollars of economic activity dependent on a pristine coastline.
They would say the same thing about their dependent on the oil patch.
Oh, absolutely. And we believe that it's reasonable to say if you're going to increase shipments of diluted bitumen, whether by rail or pipeline through BC, that there be adequate spill control in place. And this is some of the opportunity, I think, for Premier Horgan and Premier Kenney to have these conversations. But the difference in approach between the two provinces is pretty significant. When Alberta said, look, we don't think you have the authority to do that, we referred our regulations to the Court of Appeal, said, let's get the court to weigh in on whether we have the authority to do that. We think we do, you think we don't, let's have the court figure it out. Alberta has said, let's pass a law, and we're going to go ahead and use this, and we've had to take them to court to challenge the law that we believe is plainly unconstitutional.
Let me ask you about that common ground that the potential for that common ground that you just referenced, because yesterday Premier Horgan said he was going to talk to the Prime Minister about changing sort of the mix that goes through TM and possibly TMX to favor more refined products. Has that conversation occurred?
I don't know yet whether the Premier's had the opportunity to have that conversation, but it's important for people to know that over the last couple of years, the Trans Mountain pipeline has increased shipments of diluted bitumen and reduced shipments of refined product that British Columbia is dependent on. That in part is driving price increases here in British Columbia in relation to the price of gas. Given that the federal government is the owner of the pipeline and controls what goes in the pipeline, the Premier is reaching out to the Prime Minister to ask that they increase the flow of refined products to give some price easing here in British Columbia.
Is that a legally sound argument, given that though the government is the owner of the pipeline would already have secured contracts for the mix that it does flows through it right now? I mean, are you asking the federal government to break those contracts and issue new ones?
No, this isn't a legal argument. This is an ask of the federal government in relation to policy. We don't know what contracts were signed by Kinder Morgan in terms of what needs to be shipped where. What we know is the federal government is the owner of the pipeline, and that to the extent that they're able to increase the flow of refined products through the pipeline, that would be of great assistance to British Columbia.
What would that mean for BC's support or lack thereof for TMX?
So one of the principles of our Constitution is that governments and provinces not be compelled to take certain political positions based on whether or not energy will be supplied to them by the province of origin. That's the nature of our constitutional challenge to Alberta's law. I don't understand at all that the federal government is suggesting that, or even that they've taken any position, or maybe even that a formal proposal has been made to them in terms of what goes into the pipeline. So certainly premature on that point.
But I guess I'm asking because the proposition was put forward by Premier Horgan yesterday. If there were to be a change in the mix, thanks to his request and the Prime Minister and the government's doing, would that change, for example, your pursuit of that court challenge?
So there are a couple of really distinct issues here. One is that Alberta has passed a law that proposes to cut off the supply of refined oil and gas to British Columbia. We have to go ahead with this court challenge. If we just leave it,
Yeah, not that
they
one.
use the regulation, it's quite devastating. For our own reference around making sure there's adequate cleanup capacity in British Columbia related to the expansion of the pipeline, the court has reserved their decision. They're deliberating on it right now. That case has already been argued.
So I guess from my perspective, though, I'm just like from an optics perspective, what you're asking the Prime Minister to do is change the mix to help alleviate gas prices in BC, but that won't make a difference about the level to which you oppose that pipeline.
That'll be a decision made by the Premier in consultation with Mr. Kenney and with the Prime Minister.
So what's the point of making
those
the
conversations.
proposal? What's the point of making the proposal?
Well, the point of the proposal is that the pipeline that the federal government owns has reduced the level of refined products over the last couple of years that it ships to BC, and that's dramatically increased prices here in BC. And so the suggestion is that there could be price relief if the federal government shifted the mix.
So the suggestion, to be clear, is the current mix going through the TMX pipeline or the TM pipeline has caused high gas prices in BC? Because my understanding is there's a lot of other factors at play there.
Yeah, there's definitely a limit in terms of refining capacity in both British Columbia and in Alberta. We're dependent on Alberta for refined products. There's 36 cents in taxes on a litre of gasoline in BC, but it's important to note that gas has gone up about 40 cents in the last 3 months, and there's been about 1 cent of carbon tax. So it's that 39 cents that we're concerned about over the last 3 months that has absolutely no connection to taxes. It's related to refining capacity and what comes through the pipeline from Alberta.
So how much of that, though, specifically? I mean, you're making an allegation here that I imagine would have a ripple effect in Alberta. How much of that capacity, or sorry, that increase in price, do you believe is directly related to the mix through TMX?
So we know that the majority of that is made up. There's been an independent report done. It's made up of the refining margin. So the refineries that take in the crude oil and refine it into product that people can use in their cars, that's where the increase in prices come from. So if we get an increased volume of refined products through the pipeline, economics would suggest that that would have some relief on prices. How much that would have, we don't know. It depends on what the federal government is capable of doing in terms of increasing that mix. As you say, there may be contracts, we don't know. But the Premier is starting that conversation with the Prime Minister.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Mr. Eby. Really appreciate it. That's BC's Attorney General David Eby in Victoria. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video. Thanks for watching.